The massive Droo warship hung in orbit around Earth like a polished obsidian blade. Commander Kang of the United Earth Defense Force stood tall on the observation deck, his face calm despite the tension in his shoulders. This was humanity's first contact with an alien civilization, and it happened to be an empire that spanned a significant portion of the galaxy. "They're preparing to send down their delegation," said Lieutenant Yoon. Her voice steadied, despite the extraordinary circumstances. Commander Kang nodded. "Is the reception hall ready?" "Yes, sir. World leaders and top scientists are assembled. Security protocols are in place." The air in the United Nations Great Hall shimmered as 7 tall, slender figures materialized. The Droo had skin that seemed to absorb light, with small patches that glowed with an inner luminescence. High Emissary Torvex stepped forward, towering over the human representatives. "We welcome you to the embrace of the Droo Empire," announced Torvex, his translucent appendages swaying gently. "Your species shows promise despite your technological limitations." Commander Kang exchanged glances with Dr. Kim, Earth's leading xenobiologist. The slight twitch of her eyebrow told him she'd caught the condescension in the alien's tone too. Over the next 3 months, the Droo shared carefully selected knowledge about their civilization. They had ruled the stars for over 12,000 years. Their empire controlled thousands of worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their technology seemed like magic to human scientists: instant matter transportation, gravity manipulation, and energy generation beyond Earth's theoretical limits. At the Seoul Advanced Research Institute, Dr. Kim worked late one night, analyzing stellar data the Droo had shared as a cultural exchange. Something caught her attention: subtle patterns in the way certain stars in distant Droo territories were behaving. She cross-referenced with Earth's own astronomical data. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the calculations again. 2 weeks later, she requested an emergency meeting with Ambassador Park, who had been appointed as Earth's official representative to the Droo. "These readings indicate a cascading quantum destabilization moving through Droo territory," Dr. Kim explained, pointing to her detailed analysis. "It's subtle now, but the pattern is clear. It will reach their core worlds within 15 years. Ambassador Park studied the data. Unlike the Droo, humans had been analyzing quantum field interactions with stellar matter for only a few decades, but they'd made remarkable breakthroughs. "Are you certain?" "We've confirmed it with 3 independent methods," said Dr. Lee, Dr. Kim's research partner. "The quantum fabric of space is becoming unstable in these regions. The effect appears to be spreading." "And the Droo haven't noticed this?" Ambassador Park asked. "We believe their detection systems aren't calibrated for this specific phenomenon," Dr. Kim explained. "They're looking at the stars through traditional methods they've used for millennia. This requires quantum-level observation techniques we developed only recently." Ambassador Park nodded grimly. "I'll deliver the warning personally." 3 days later, Ambassador Park stood before the Droo High Council on their massive station orbiting Jupiter. 7 senior Droo sat on elevated platforms, their skin patterns shifting with subtle colors that betrayed their emotional states. "Honorable Council," Ambassador Park began, "our scientists have detected a concerning pattern in stellar data from your territories." She presented Dr. Kim's findings, explaining the quantum destabilization and its projected path. As the detailed presentation concluded, ripples of blue and green amusement, Dr. Kim had explained, passed through the communication fields of the council members. "Your concern is noted," replied Torvex, his tone gentle but dismissive. "But the Droo have been mapping stars since your ancestors discovered fire. These readings reflect natural stellar phenomena we have documented for thousands of years." With respect, Ambassador Park pressed, "Our quantum analysis methods are different from your traditional observations. This destabilization will reach your core worlds within 15 years, potentially causing catastrophic effects." Another council member spoke, his voice tinged with condescension. "We appreciate Earth's enthusiastic participation in galactic affairs. However, stellar mechanics is a field we mastered before your species invented the wheel. Your instruments are likely misinterpreting normal stellar variations. Despite Ambassador Park's attempts to explain further, the Council moved on to other matters. They seemed to view humanity's warning as the charming but misguided concerns of a child. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, Dr. Lee, who had accompanied Ambassador Park as scientific advisor, whispered, "They're wrong." Ambassador Park nodded slightly. "I know. But how do we convince an empire that's ruled the stars for 12,000 years that they've missed something?" "We may not be able to," Dr. Lee replied. "But we need to prepare for what's coming. If they won't listen, we need a plan D." Ambassador Park gazed out at the magnificent Droo vessels surrounding the station. "Start working on it immediately. If they won't save themselves, we at least need to save humanity." As their shuttle departed for Earth, Dr. Lee looked back at the massive Droo station. How can a civilization so advanced be so blind? "Power and success breed complacency," Ambassador Park said. "They believe they know everything worth knowing. It may be their downfall." Back on Earth, Dr. Kim received their report and immediately began drafting proposals for what would later be called the Cassandra Protocol. If the Droo wouldn't listen, humanity would have to face the coming storm alone. 5 years had passed since the Droo dismissed humanity's warning. In a secure underground facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, Dr. Han stood before a wall of screens displaying star maps. Red zones marked the advancing quantum destabilization, creeping inexorably toward Droo core worlds. "The latest calculations confirm our original predictions," she said to the assembled world leaders on the secure video link. "The collapse is accelerating. We have less time than we thought." United Earth President Jin nodded gravely. "Then we proceed with the Cassandra Protocol immediately. How soon can the arcs be ready?" Defense Minister Ba consulted her tablet. "The first wave can depart within 3 months. We've been building in secret for years." No one had expected the Droo to listen after their third formal warning was met with barely concealed amusement. The ancient empire had grown too comfortable in its dominance of the stars. They couldn't imagine that a young species might see something they had missed. The Cassandra Protocol began quietly. Families received relocation notices in stages, carefully managed to prevent panic. Remote regions of Earth were evacuated first. Their inhabitants moved to preparation centers where they learned the truth. Humanity would need to abandon the solar system entirely. On Mars, enormous underground shipyards had been constructing interstellar arcs since the day after the first Droo dismissal. Jupiter's moons housed fusion reactor factories and quantum shield generators, all built with technology reverse-engineered from what little the Droo had shared, combined with human innovation. Dr. Han worked tirelessly with her team in the Pacific facility, refining their models. She hadn't seen the sun in months. "The data shows something troubling," she told General Choi during their weekly briefing. "The quantum collapse will accelerate dramatically once it reaches Droo core systems." General Choi studied the simulation with a frown. "Why?" "Their defense grid," Dr. Han explained, pointing to the network of energy stations surrounding Droo prime worlds. "The way they generate their defensive fields is actually feeding the collapse. It's like throwing fuel on a fire they don't believe exists." "Can we contact them again?" asked the general. With this new information, Dr. Han shook her head. "They've rejected 3 formal warnings. The last time, they didn't even grant Ambassador Park an audience. We need to focus on saving as many humans as we can." The first ARC ships departed from Mars without fanfare, their massive forms slipping into the darkness of space, carrying 20,000 humans each toward distant star systems chosen for their stability. The ships utilized a new propulsion system that bent space in ways even the Droo hadn't mastered. In orbit around Jupiter, Droo observer Zixmer noticed unusual energy signatures from the human outposts near the gas giant's moons. "The humans are behaving erratically again," he reported to the Imperial Council during his monthly update. They appear to be abandoning outposts without strategic cause. Several mining stations have gone dark, yet automated systems continue to function. Grand Minister Quar-El waved a dismissive appendage. Their patterns have always been unpredictable. This is likely some internal political realignment, perhaps resource shortages on their homeworld. Should we offer assistance? Asked a junior council member. They haven't requested any, Quar-El replied. The humans are proud. Let them manage their internal affairs. Back on Earth, the evacuation proceeded with remarkable efficiency. Whole cities were emptied in carefully orchestrated waves. Public announcements spoke of temporary relocations for environmental restoration projects. To maintain the illusion of normalcy, automated systems kept lights on in empty buildings and transportation networks running on schedule. In the Atlantic Preparation Center, 6-year-old Min clutched his stuffed bear as his parents explained they would be taking a very long trip. "Are we going to see the stars?" he asked. His father nodded. "Yes, we're going to a new home among the stars." "Will the Droo be there?" Min asked. His parents exchanged glances. "No," his mother said gently. "We're going somewhere the Droo haven't been yet." 3 more arcs departed from the dark side of the moon, their massive engines leaving no visible trail. Human colonies on Mars began shutting down their surface operations, populations moving to the underground facilities where the last arcs were being completed. Dr. Hand's team made another troubling discovery. The quantum collapse was advancing 15% faster than their original models had predicted. "We need to accelerate the timeline," she told the Emergency Council. "At the current rate, we have 18 months before the collapse reaches our solar system." President Jin looked grim. "Can we evacuate everyone in time? If we increase arc production and sacrifice some comfort standards?" "Yes," replied Minister Ba. "But we'll need to abandon the pretense soon. The Droo will notice a full-scale evacuation." "Let them notice," said President Jin. "By then, it will be too late for them to interfere." In orbit around Earth, a Droo diplomatic vessel observed unusual patterns of movement. Cities were emptying faster than their automated systems could disguise. The Droo ambassador requested a meeting with human officials and was politely informed that Earth's leadership was addressing internal matters. Dr. Han worked through another sleepless night, studying the collapse progression. She pulled up images of Droo worlds, beautiful ancient civilizations unaware of their approaching doom. For a moment, she felt sadness for the empire that had dismissed humanity. "We could have saved them too," she whispered to the empty room. General Choi found her asleep at her desk the next morning. "You should rest properly," he said, placing a cup of coffee beside her. "There's no time," she replied, immediately checking the latest data. "Every day matters now." Across the solar system, the evacuation continued. Human presence shrank to a fraction of what it had been. Ships departed silently into the void, carrying the hopes and future of humanity to distant sanctuaries. Only those needed to maintain the illusion and complete the final preparations remained. The greatest migration in human history unfolded in near-perfect secrecy, right under the watching eyes of the ancient empire that had deemed humanity too primitive to heed. The silence was sudden and complete. One day, human communication networks functioned normally across Earth and its colonies. The next day, they fell silent. No distress signals, no declarations of war, no pleas for help, just silence. At first, the Droo Imperial Communications Hub assumed it was a technical error. They reset their systems and aimed more sensitive receivers toward Earth. Nothing came back except the automated beacons guiding ships safely through the solar system. After 3 days of silence, the Droo High Council grew concerned enough to dispatch an investigation fleet. "Approach with caution," ordered Grand Admiral Bornex. "If they've destroyed themselves in some primitive conflict, there may be lingering dangers." Admiral 1, commander of the Science Fleet, led the expedition. His flagship, the Eternal Wisdom, entered Earth orbit 7 days after human communications had ceased. The initial scans puzzled his crew. There are no radiation signatures indicating warfare, reported his science officer. No signs of biological contamination. Power systems are functioning at minimal levels across the planet. Life signs? Asked Admiral One. None that match human patterns, sir. Only the planet's native animals and plants. Admiral One ordered survey teams to investigate major human settlements. He chose to lead the first team himself, landing at the United Nations headquarters in New York, where humans had first welcomed the Droo delegation years earlier. The massive building stood intact but empty. Dust had already begun to settle on the abandoned desks. In the main assembly room, chairs were neatly pushed in, as if after the conclusion of a routine meeting. Nothing was broken. Nothing suggested panic or conflict. It appears they left voluntarily, Admiral One reported after his team completed their survey. No evidence of conflict or disease. They simply departed. Across Earth, the pattern repeated. Major cities stood empty but undamaged. Vehicles were parked neatly. Homes showed signs of methodical packing. Museums had been emptied of their most valuable artifacts. Data centers had been wiped clean. 7 billion humans had vanished, along with most of their orbital habitats, spacecraft, and portable infrastructure. In Beijing, a Droo exploration team found a school classroom with a half-erased message on a board. Remember to pack your favorite. The rest had been wiped away. How could an entire species disappear without our knowledge? Demanded Quar-El during an emergency council session. Admiral One's hologram flickered before the council. They prepared thoroughly and secretly. We found evidence of extensive underground construction across Earth, Mars, and several moons. These facilities appear to have been shipyards and launch sites. They built a fleet, Bornex asked in disbelief. A substantial one, based on the scale of these facilities, using technologies that seemed to be advanced versions of what we shared with them, combined with innovations we don't recognize. This news sent ripples of concern through the council chamber. The Droo had carefully controlled what technologies they shared with humanity. The idea that humans had not only mastered those technologies, but improved upon them was disturbing. At a research station in what had been Seoul, Droo scientists made an intriguing discovery. A partial database that had not been completely erased contained references to something called the collapse. Most information had been deliberately removed, leaving only fragments. We found this across multiple research centers, reported Chief Scientist Lyerbox. Always the same term, the collapse, associated with stellar data and quantum field analysis. In the empty office of what appeared to have been a senior human scientist, a Droo investigator found a star chart with certain regions marked in red. The marked regions corresponded with outer territories of the Droo Empire. Grand Admiral Bornex brought this evidence before the High Council. Could they have been right? He asked, his skin patterns showing serious concern. About the quantum destabilization they warned us about years ago. High Minister Quar-El's appendages twitched with irritation. Impossible. Our astronomers have monitored those regions for thousands of years. We would have detected any meaningful change. Yet an entire species has abandoned their homeworld based on something they believed was coming. Bornex countered. A species we acknowledge was remarkably intelligent, despite their technological limitations. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Very well, Quar-El finally said. Analyze their warning again. Thoroughly this time. Dispatch science vessels to the regions they marked in their charts. 3 days later, a Droo science vessel in the Outer Rim reported unusual quantum field readings from a star system on the edge of Droo space, exactly where the human charts had indicated the phenomenon would begin. On Earth, Admiral One's team continued their investigation. In an underground facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, they discovered a sealed room that had escaped the thorough data purge. Inside was a comprehensive simulation of what the humans had called the collapse, a cascading quantum field destabilization that would render normal space uninhabitable as it spread. The simulation showed the phenomenon reaching Droo core worlds within 7 years. "Send this to the Council immediately," ordered Admiral 1. At an abandoned human colony on Mars, another discovery. A message left deliberately intact in a small habitat dome, written in the Droo language on a simple paper note. "We warned you. We couldn't convince you, so we saved ourselves. There are sanctuary regions beyond the collapse zone. If you act quickly enough, you might save some of your people too." The note was signed simply, "Humanity." In the council chamber, Quar-L's skin had turned pale as the evidence mounted. "How could we have missed this?" "We were too certain of our knowledge," replied Bornex. "Too dismissive of others." "Can we track where they went?" asked another council member. "They've covered their trail well," Admiral 1 reported. "But we've detected unusual subspace distortions leading toward the galactic rim, away from the regions marked for collapse." "Pursue them," ordered Quar-L. "Find these humans. They clearly understand this phenomenon better than we do." But even as the order was given, the first confirmed reports came in. 3 stars on the edge of Droo space had begun to dim in exactly the pattern the human simulations had predicted. The Council watched in stunned silence as the data confirmed humanity's warning from 5 years earlier, a warning they had dismissed with amusement. "How much time do we have?" asked Quar-L. "If their models are correct," Admiral 1 replied, "less than 7 years before it reaches our core worlds, much less to save the outer colonies." The mighty Droo Empire, ruler of thousands of worlds for 12 millennia, found itself facing extinction, and saved only by the foresight of a species they had considered primitive. "Find them," Quar-L ordered again, "whatever it takes." The stars began to die just as the humans had warned. It started at the outer edges of Droo space, in a remote sector known as the Veil Nebula. 3 stars dimmed simultaneously, their light fading over the course of just a few weeks. Droo scientists initially blamed it on cosmic dust interference. Then 5 more stars dimmed, then dozens. On the imperial capital of Drooler Prime, Science Minister Devlar stood before the High Council, her slender frame trembling slightly. "The pattern matches the human predictions exactly," she reported, unable to keep her voice steady. "The quantum collapse has begun." High Minister Quar-L's skin flickered with patterns of distress. "How certain are you?" "Beyond any doubt. We've confirmed it using every method available to us, including some adapted from recovered human research." The council chamber erupted in voices, the normal decorum of the 12,000-year-old government breaking down in the face of existential threat. "Silence," commanded Grand Admiral Bornex. "Minister Devlar, continue your report." Devlar activated a holographic display showing the progression of the collapse. "It's moving faster than even the humans predicted. At current speeds, it will reach our mid-rim colonies within 3 months, and the core worlds 18 months after that." "What happens to worlds caught in this collapse?" asked a junior council member. Devlar's skin paled. "Based on observations of affected systems, the quantum field destabilizes completely. Stars lose cohesion. Planets can't maintain stable orbits. Life becomes impossible as the fundamental forces themselves become unpredictable." "Can it be stopped?" demanded Quar-L. "Not with any technology we possess." The grim reality settled over the council. The Droo Empire, which had dominated the galaxy for 12 millennia, faced extinction within 2 years. On the outer rim, panic had already taken hold. Colony worlds that had lived under Droo protection for thousands of years suddenly found themselves abandoned as Imperial forces retreated toward the core. Communications became increasingly distorted as the quantum field destabilized. Helian colony requesting immediate evacuation came one desperate transmission. "The star is fluctuating wildly. Surface temperatures air." The message ended in static. One by one, communications from outer colonies ceased entirely. Evacuation ships reported bizarre phenomena as they fled the advancing collapse. Space itself seemed to warp and twist. Navigation became nearly impossible close to the affected zones. On Drooler Prime, Citizens packed whatever they could carry and fought for space on outbound ships. The orderly society that had known only peace and prosperity for generations descended into chaos. The Imperial Guard struggled to maintain order as food shortages began and power systems failed intermittently. The High Council convened in permanent emergency session, desperately seeking solutions to a threat they had dismissed for years. Every scientist, engineer, and theorist in the Empire was called to contribute ideas. "Could we create a counter-resonance field?" suggested one researcher. "The scale would be impossible," replied Devlar. "We would need energy equivalent to several stars." "What about evacuation to another galaxy?" asked another. "Our fastest ships would take centuries to reach even the nearest satellite galaxy." As each proposal was raised and dismissed, the collapse continued its relentless advance. 3 more colony systems went dark. A science vessel that ventured too close to the phenomenon disappeared with all hands. In the midst of this growing desperation, Admiral 1 transmitted from Earth orbit. "We've found something," he announced, his image flickering slightly on the Council chamber's main screen. "A beacon, left in a stable lunar orbit. It contains detailed maps of the collapse progression and," he hesitated, "coordinates for sanctuary systems." The Council fell silent. "Sanctuary systems," repeated Quar-El. "Yes, Minister. The humans identified star systems naturally shielded from the collapse due to unique quantum field characteristics. They've provided coordinates for 17 such systems, along with detailed navigation instructions to reach them safely." "This could be a trap," suggested one counselor, "luring us into ambush." Admiral 1's skin patterns showed dismissal of this idea. "The data includes extensive scientific measurements verifying these systems will remain stable. And there's more. The beacon contains designs for shield technology specifically engineered to protect against quantum destabilization." Devlar studied the transmitted data with growing excitement. "This is beyond our current capabilities, but the principles are sound. With these designs, we could protect evacuation ships during transit." "Why would they help us?" asked Quar-El, after we dismissed their warnings. No one had an answer. The beacon contained one final message, displayed now in the Council chamber. It was simple. "We hope you never need this. If you do, we're sorry we couldn't convince you sooner. There is room for many in the sanctuary systems. We've prepared what we could." It was signed, "Humanity." Quar-El's appendages trembled. "Begin immediate evacuation to these sanctuary coordinates. Priority to ships carrying cultural records, genetic databases, and young." As the orders spread throughout what remained of the Empire, the Droo faced a humbling truth. Their salvation would come from following the path laid by a species they had considered primitive. On the mid-rim world of Lanos, Governor Tur watched his planet's twin moons through a viewport. One had already developed a strange bluish aura as the quantum collapse approached. "Will we reach the sanctuaries in time?" he asked the captain of the evacuation vessel. "We'll try," replied the captain. "The humans gave us a chance. It's more than we gave them." As the ship broke orbit, Tur looked back at the world his family had governed for 20 generations. It would be uninhabitable within days. In the darkness between stars, millions of Droo ships followed coordinates left by a vanished humanity, racing against the collapse that threatened to erase their ancient civilization from existence. And somewhere beyond the galactic rim, human vessels continued their own journey, having saved what they could of their own species, and left a lifeline for the empire that had once dismissed them. The remnant fleet of the once mighty Droo Empire stretched across light years of space. 10,000 ships carrying 20 million survivors, all that remained of a civilization that had ruled billions. From the command deck of the lead vessel, High Minister Quar-El watched the navigation display as they approached the first sanctuary system. "We're entering the border zone now," reported the navigator. "Quantum field readings are stabilizing." Just as the human data predicted, a collective sigh of relief passed through the bridge crew. For weeks, they had traveled through increasingly unstable space, their shields barely holding against the quantum disruptions. 3 ships had been lost when their engines failed during a particularly severe fluctuation. "Begin scans of the system," ordered Quarel. What they found amazed them. The star system included 2 habitable planets, both showing signs of recent preparation. Orbital platforms circled each world, ready to receive refugees. The planets themselves had areas of engineered atmosphere and temperature regulation, the beginning stages of terraforming. "There are energy signatures on the larger planet," said the science officer. "Fusion generators, already operational." As the Droo fleet moved into stable orbits, exploration teams descended to the surface. They found shelter structures, atmospheric processors, water purification systems, all built with a curious mixture of human and Droo-compatible technology. Captain Sock led the first team to enter a large facility near the planet's equator. Inside, they found medical equipment, food production systems, and data centers filled with technical information. "They built all this for us," Sock said in wonder, "even after we dismissed them." Over the next several weeks, more Droo ships arrived, guided by the human beacon's navigation data. The refugees began settling on both planets, using the infrastructure left for them. Engineers studied the human technology with growing respect. "Their quantum shield designs are brilliant," said Chief Engineer Rock during a council meeting. "Simple but effective. We would never have conceived of this approach." Yet of the humans themselves, there was no sign, no settlements, no ships. Nothing but the helping hand they had extended to a civilization that had once looked down on them. The final section of the beacon contained a message that had taken Droo linguists weeks to fully decrypt. Quarel read it aloud to the gathered leadership. "We go to find the source, and, if possible, the solution. The preparations we leave behind should sustain the Droo for generations. Perhaps one day, our paths will cross again among distant stars." Silence followed as the implications sank in. "They didn't just flee," said Admiral One. "They're seeking the cause of the collapse. A task even we deemed impossible," added Devlar. Young Droo scientist Jin had been studying human artifacts since their discovery on Earth. Their approach to problems was different from ours. Where we relied on established knowledge, they constantly questioned and reimagined. It made them innovative in ways we had forgotten. As the seasons passed on their new homeworlds, the Droo established a functioning society again. Children were born who had never seen Drooler Prime. The old empire was remembered in stories and historical records, but a new civilization emerged, one shaped by the humbling experience of near extinction and rescue by a species they had underestimated. In schools across the sanctuary worlds, young Droo learned a new phrase, repeated like a sacred mantra: "Never ignore a human warning." The story of humanity's foresight and generosity became central to Droo culture. Statues depicted human and Droo figures standing together. Research centers were named after Earth scientists like Kim and Han. The highest scientific honor became the Human Wisdom Award, given to those who challenged established thinking. 50 years after the Great Evacuation, the quantum collapse reached its peak, engulfing nearly a third of the galaxy. The Droo sanctuary systems remained safe, protected by the natural formations the humans had identified. 100 years later, scientists detected the first signs that the collapse was slowing. 200 years after that, long-range telescopes observed the affected regions beginning to stabilize again. Stars reformed, planets settled into stable orbits, the galaxy was healing. And then, 500 years after the Droo had fled their homeworlds, deep space telescopes detected unusual energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim, patterns unlike anything in Droo records, yet somehow familiar to those who had studied human technology. Could it be them? Wondered Observatory Director Tam, studying the readings. After all this time, the question sparked debate throughout Droo society. Some believed the energy signatures proved humans had succeeded in their quest to understand and counter the collapse. Others argued that after 5 centuries, humanity would have evolved beyond recognition, perhaps even transcended physical form entirely. A message was sent toward the energy signatures, using both modern Droo communication and older human protocols. Years passed with no response. Then, on an ordinary day, a small ship appeared in orbit around the primary sanctuary world. Its design was unlike anything the Droo had seen before, sleek, almost organic in appearance, yet clearly built with advanced technology. The ship's lone occupant requested permission to land. When the landing ramp opened, a figure emerged that was recognizably human, though somehow different. Taller, with eyes that seemed to see beyond normal space. "I bring greetings from humanity," the visitor said. "We thought it was time to check on old friends." As news of the visitor spread, Droo from all walks of life gathered to hear humanity's story. They learned how humans had journeyed to the source of the collapse, a dimensional boundary where two universes brushed against each other, creating the quantum disruption. How they had worked for centuries to heal the breach. How they had evolved through their understanding of trans-dimensional physics. On the final night of the visitor's stay, elderly High Minister Jin, a descendant of the first refugees, asked the question that had haunted the Droo for generations. "Why did you help us, even after we dismissed your warnings?" The human smiled. "Because that's what advanced civilizations do. They protect life, even when that life doesn't recognize the danger." As the visitor prepared to depart, promises were made for future contact and cooperation between the two species. The Droo stood together, watching the strange ship rise into the stars, filled with gratitude toward the species they had once considered primitive. They had learned the greatest lesson any civilization could learn. True advancement isn't measured by age or technology, but by wisdom and compassion. The humans had possessed both, even when the ancient Droo Empire had not. The end.